Поприветствуем, Jakub Kaluzny.
Hello. Okay, hello. So I'm Jakub, and my topic will be about Hadoop interface security. So the first question, do you use big data? Maybe you don't use it. You don't have a Hadoop installation, but your data is used in many Hadoop installations, in banks, in internet shops, everywhere. And this talk will be about hacking mostly web interfaces of Hadoop installations. So a quick introduction. I'm a security consultant at Securing, a Polish company. We do penetration tests mainly in the financial industry, so mostly banks, and we consult the all phases of the development. I'm a researcher, so this talk will be about Hadoop, but I'm specialized in network protocols, in fixed protocols on Forex market. Actually, Russia's got many software companies which do software for the Forex market, printers, and any other proprietary network protocols. Okay. So the agenda for today is like a short introduction about some big data nonsenses, then a crash course on hacking Hadoop installations, and ways to protect the big data environment. So an output of my research is not only the write-up of the CVEs, because there are not a lot of them, but we want to publish and share a whole OWASP cheat sheet for hacking big data environments and big data web interfaces. So a quick result on the beginning, the summary of our research. In a normal situation, a standard user in a big data environment has got access to the data, and the admin users got admin privileges. And the admin does not get access to the data, and the other side, the standard user does not have the admin privileges, right? So based on these vulnerabilities, through these vulnerabilities, we're able to get admin user getting access to the data, as well as standard user getting admin privileges, and of course, with no account, so an anonymous attacker could get admin privileges and of course, data access. Okay, so the first question, what is Hadoop? Because you have to know your target when you attack something. So maybe first the answer will be what Hadoop is not. So it's not a normal database, because in a normal database you've got quite a clear target. You've got users, you've got roles, users have roles, they operate on data, and data is produced out of some model. And the architecture of a normal database is quite simple. So you've got a website, it connects to the database. Of course you can manage the database from some administrative interfaces like Oracle, PHP, admin, whatsoever. Of course, the application it's not only web application like a website. Of course, there are some strange interfaces to databases, like for example, a camera which takes a photo of a license plate, then does the optical recognition and put it into the system. So, of course, you can get an SQL injection through license plate, but that's still a normal database scenario. So injection points for a normal database are as follows. So there's a laser, yeah. So we could attack the user himself, his channel, HTTP channel to the app server. Of course, we can attack the database link between the app server and the database. Of course, we can attack the admin himself and the admin interface, these protocols. And of course, we can attack the database from the LAN infrastructure. That's for the normal database. You've got clear rules and clear target. So the question is, what is with big data and with Hadoop environments? And a quick anecdote. So we were doing an assessment in, let's call it financial industry, and they have really critical banking data. It was not a bank, it was a company which is not regulated by the law, but it had many banking data. Everything was in one database. So there was a critical banking data with one supplier because it was supplied from the bank, and an application with many users. And only one table was common between these two data sources. So we asked them, why don't they split it into two databases with a DB link, so accessing only one table one common table, and make it more secure, because if the user has access to the same database as where the critical data is, there might have been some problems. And they answered, no, that's too much effort. We want to have fast statistics from all data. And we are actually thinking about introducing Hadoop, because Hadoop is so cool and it's fast. Okay, so what is Hadoop? Okay, this is not Hadoop. This is Hadoop architecture. No, maybe let's go to this more straightforward. So basically, there are a lot of images on the internet showing the Hadoop ecosystem. They are very, very complicated. I will explain later which interface is for what. But most of the installations have common injection points. So we've got the user interface, which is mostly Hadoop user environment with some applications like Big, Hive, Scoop, Zookeeper, anything. And the user is, in most cases, the employee of the company which have the big data installation. Then we've got the admin interface. The most popular ones are Ambari and Ranger. I will talk about it later because they had critical vulnerabilities. Of course, there are some interconnections to the other subsystems, like, for example, there are out providers, LDAP, or like for monitoring, Splunk. And there is like the whole kernel of the Hadoop database, so MapReduce or the Yarn open source, HDFS, and HBase. And you, of course, can attack the database from the LAN infrastructure. So we divided all Hadoop into like a few groups of interfaces so that we can analyze each one. Okay, a Hadoop scenario. From the business perspective, you put like a shitload of data to the database, then some smart Hadoop elephants compute this, and you've got money. That's from the business perspective. What is a lot of data? Here you've got like the numbers from the Facebook installation. It is a lot. It is like worth billions of dollars or even like 1 billion or something like that. But what we did was, from our latest assessment, we had Hadoop installations made from 32 machines. There were about 20 servers with different interfaces. The whole amount was like 24 terabytes per machine. Well, that's not really interesting. Okay, from the attacker perspective, this installation looked like house of cards, which is falling down. And I'm going to show you why. Let's do a quick threat modeling or risk analysis, because a pen test without threat modeling is a game. It's not a work. So first of all, who could attack the Hadoop installation? Of course, from the business perspective, you can think about APT, competitors, and so on. But from the technical perspective, you've got two types of attackers. External attackers, which can be completely anonymous, so people who found your installation on the internet, or can try to inject something into your internal infrastructure. It can be also, of course, the employee who knows more about architecture, and an insider, so an employee or an employee who got hacked, so infected machine. And of course, there are some vulnerabilities which can be used only if these infected employee have rights in Hadoop. So for example, he's got user rights or he's got the admin rights. Okay, let's skip for a moment how and find out what can be done in the Hadoop installation. Well, for example, of course, there can be a full compromise. Have you heard about the recent hack in Poland? So a bank got hacked by a single attacker. Anybody heard about it? So a guy, like a single guy, hacked into the online banking system. He got a shell on the online banking system and on the transactional system. And what did he do? He was lame because he put a server-side web inject, JavaScript web inject, on the online banking system to catch usernames and passwords. Come on, with a shell on the online banking system. Okay. Why hacking Hadoop installations is so easy? Well, in my opinion, because most of the companies concentrate on the data safety. So they invest a lot of money to backups, to like double the infrastructure and so on, but they do not care about data privacy and data authorization. Okay. We asked one of our clients in one of our Hadoop assessments what data will be there, so like what columns, what tables, and so on. And they said that they do not know. Like a typical scenario for a bank is to put all data, and I mean all of it. So all transaction data, sales data, clients data. Then there are a lot of computations. And then comes big data analytic. Well, here is big data analytic. And he thinks about this data and he says, okay, people who bought a dash cam for their car are more likely to take a loan for a new car in the next month because they're going to crash. And we should show the adverts to these clients. So the banks want to have any data in their Hadoop installation. Okay, of course there can be data theft. Because out of data from the Hadoop installations, you can make many information. Like for example, here is the Target shop figured out that the teen girl was pregnant before her father did, because she was buying some like special particular things which most of the women which are pregnant buy. Okay, of course, like Facebook has got a lot of intel from the Hadoop database. Okay, well, of course, we can do the privilege escalation. We can try to do that. Authentication bypass. We could do the denial of system. And the most interesting is getting into data, but the more interesting would be to tamper this data. Okay, let's see how to do it. So back on this slide, what Hadoop is. This is a normal Hadoop ecosystem. I rewrote it to like a more better way. Here is the whole Hadoop interface. The Hue server, so Hadoop user environment, is the application where 90% of actions in Hadoop are made from users. So a user, standard employee or an admin logs into Hue, and then he's got many applications, actually like 20 of them, like Uzi, Pig, Mahout, and so on and so on. They are modules of one application, which is Hue. Okay. Actually, here's the other thing. So Hue is a user interface where the Cube, Hive, and Zookeeper and Pig is. Who is the user of Hue? Like employees, but from the business perspective, everyone in the company, in most of the companies we have been to, most of the employees got access to this data. Also interns, trainees, and like new employees. And it's quite easy to get an insider in a company which uses big data environment. Okay, so we split interfaces of Hadoop into 4 groups, or maybe 5. So the Hadoop itself, it's the kernels, or like MapReduce and HDFS, so the whole file system. But we've got user interfaces, admin interfaces, interfaces or infrastructure which is specific to the distribution, because there are many distributions, and I will tell about that, and the external interfaces, so connections to the other subsystems. So now I want to present you like a technical meet and our story with big data assessment, a crash course on hacking big data environment. So the first thing is the user interfaces. Okay, we've got Apache Hue, I told you about it, with many applications. Of course, there are some others. As for the pen tests, they're not very widely used. So in this presentation, they're not going to be mentioned many times. Okay, is Hue an internal interface? If you would be an architecture of the Hadoop installations, would you put Hue outside the corporation, I mean outside the network? That's the question. If you know what to look, for example on Shodan or anything, like this is one of the server headers from the Hue interface, you will find many installations. Most of them are from, it's not visible, from the cloud. Okay, maybe there are like many of them. So yeah, okay. Hue should be an internal interface, and it shouldn't be on the internet, but it is. And then let's see what are the risks out of it. Okay, here is a Hue overview. You've got many applications. For example, you can get direct access to the Hadoop SQL queries. But we found an interesting thing. It will be a little bit lame because I'm going to present a DOM XSS now, but please expect more serious vulnerabilities later. But this DOM XSS is interesting because of the fact that it is in Hue. So why it is in Hue? Because this Hue is using Django 1.2.3. And Django 1.2.3 is using an old version of jQuery. So there is a whole process of putting vulnerability in this software. So the attack scenario, well, is simple. If you got a person who ran the XSS, then you can get access to all Hadoop data, which is presented to this user. Okay. The default configuration for Apache Hue really sucks. And the default configuration is used in most cases. Because Hadoop installations are, in most cases, cloud-based. So the operator of the infrastructure cares about the security and the configuration of all of these interfaces. Or they are supplied as a virtual appliance. So the default configuration is that it allows for many other attacks, like clickjacking, or it presents the whole list of the files and catalogs. It has even the debug mode turned on by default. Okay, now let's go to the technical meat of admin interfaces. I mentioned two admin interfaces. One of them is Ambari, used for provisioning and monitoring. And the second is Ranger, which is completely focused on security. Rodrigo said in the keynote that 1/3 of the vulnerabilities in the US government hacks are in the security software. So actually, Ranger is the security software, and it contains so simple vulnerabilities. Actually, the vulnerabilities I will show you now are quite trivial. They're not technically complicated, but they are easy to find, and they've got big impact on risk. Okay, of course there are some others, other admin interfaces, but as for this presentation, I will stay with Ambari and Ranger. So what is Ambari? Actually, it is like an admin interface for Hadoop, where you can see all clusters, data about all the clusters, current CPU data, current network data, and so on. You can control in Ambari which user has access to which data and so on, so provisioning. And Ambari is an admin interface, right? So it should be hidden in the internal network, and even normal employees like interns, trainees, and new employees should not have access to the Ambari interface, right? So, okay, here is still the architecture. Like the most interesting thing from this scheme is that the web client is 100% REST. So is Ambari internal interface? Well, if you just type Ambari to Shodan search box, you've got a lot of Ambari interfaces on the internet. Most from the cloudbigdataplatform.com. Well, there are like 20 of them. And they're accessible, so you can log in. Of course, if you know the credentials, right? I think like that's a fail. Okay, so the rules of the standard deployment of Ambari allows a normal standard user to log into Ambari and see some of the data in the read-only state. Why? I don't know, because like an admin interface should be really hidden from normal users. So of course there are like a lot of low-hanging fruits there, like directory listing, no CSRF protection. But okay, let's stay with some like normal vulnerabilities. There is an interesting proxy script. So a standard request to this script is, well, here is the host name of the installation, and it responds with response of this URL. So what to do with a proxy script, right? You just try to proxy to Google, proxy to internal servers, and actually it worked. So we were able to scan the internal network of the Hadoop installation through this proxy script. Of course, it works only for HTTP and HTTPS connections, but binary, you could actually see if there was an open port, any of them, like FTP or SSH. And Hadoop environment is created in a way so that from outside the clusters, clusters are in like a DMZ. So outside from the clusters, you cannot run this query. So you cannot open this URL and see what's going on. This URL is accessible only from the servers in a DMZ, so from the inside of the cluster. And what it appeared to be that you can actually download all the logs from the yarn, so the main MapReduce module in the Hadoop interface, and download any of these logs. Like 20 megabytes of yarn data allowed us to get some information about the data inside and about users who connect to it, and actually to the whole proxy script allowed us to scan all the network and map the architecture. Okay, that CV. Also, after this presentation, after ZeroNights, I'm going to produce, as I said, the write-ups. Well, they are actually done. So I'm going to publish the write-ups of these CVEs, like with completely technical details, as well as the checklist, OWASP checklist for Hadoop pen testing. Okay, these were Hadoop in the version 1.5 to 2.02. So what you have to do is hijack a standard account or use Hue XSS to perform a CSRF, because there is no CSRF protection in Ambari. Then you have to use the CVE and get access to the local network, which is a delimitarized zone, right? HTTP and HTTPS only, but binary you could say which port is open, so it's still okay. And of course you could download logs and exploit other Hadoop servers, right? Okay, that was about Ambari. Let's switch to the another admin interface, which is Ranger. Ranger provides central administration for policies, user groups, so authentication, analytics, and audit data. So it is a software like another Hadoop module made to maintain security inside Hadoop environment. So particularly, it should be very secure because it offers security, right? Here is a quick architecture of Ranger. So it has the policy manager, and if someone wants to access some data or access some servers, Ranger responds with his policy manager, right? Okay, this is the interface of Apache Ranger. Now it looks a little bit different because it's the old version. So we've got policy manager, user groups, analytics, and audit. And of course, each of these menus got some sub-menus, right? And the mistake, as well as for the Ambari, is that any user can log into Ranger and view very low information, but in a read-only state. But like I think only policy manager and one of the submenu of policy manager was in the read-only state for the normal users. The other menus were hidden. So the question is how they were hidden. Because if you see this menu and open the HTML source for it, look in the HTTP response, you could see something like that. So for example, user tab is visible only if you've got the JS variable is system admin, right? Does it make sense to you to hide menu in the JS script? Well, it turned out that actually by just copying these URLs, a standard user can perform actions in Ranger. Here is like all functionalities of Ranger. The red ones are those which are accessible for the normal users. And actually, like here, edit is not accessible, but on the list submenu, you could delete or edit things. So still the editing of users is possible. And it is trivial bug. I mean, it is not rocket science to just open the links from the HTML source, right? And it is a security software. Actually, there was the previous name for the Apache Ranger was Apache Argus, and actually it was the previous name was XA Secure. So it changed the name 2 times. XA Secure is an Israeli company which was recently bought by Hortonworks, and in all the materials they say they provide security software, and well, then they should provide the security for their product itself, right? Okay. So here is another CVE. So what you have to do, you have to hijack a standard Hadoop account in any of the previous ways, log into Ranger with, of course, low permissions, but then escalate privileges and use the direct access to the functionality which should not be shown to the normal user, right? And you could edit accounts, edit authorization rules. So the whole connection to, for example, LDAP or Kerberos or whatsoever, and the access policy to the clusters and to the data. Okay, there was a second vulnerability in Apache Ranger. Really funny one. I mean, still with big risks. So on the audit section, in the login sessions, there is a list of all login sessions to the applications. Of course, there are those with success, but there are like wrong password logins. And in the user agent column, there is user agent. Anybody's got an idea what is the vulnerability? Anyone? Yeah, I think you said it right. So it's XSS in the user agents. Another time, trivial vulnerability. So if you set the user agent with the XSS, it is a stored XSS in the admin interface, which is deployed for security in Hadoop environment, right? Okay, it is a stored XSS which could be exploited by anonymous account which has a network access to Ranger, right? Because all of you have to do is to target an Hadoop installation where the Apache Ranger is on the internet, or you have got to the access to the network. Then log in with any user and password, like anything, and use an XSS in your user agent, and you've got the stored XSS in the admin panel, which will be targeted directly to the admin, so you don't have to escalate privileges. And then you can do anything, like deploy beef or whatsoever. Do a CSRF script to change your data, change the data, or like change the policy. So we've got admin rights in the security software of the Hadoop environment. Okay. Well, both vulnerabilities are now patched, but for a while there was a really funny thing. I sent the report to the Apache Ranger team, developers, and they said, okay, we'll patch it. And they put it, okay, so this is how the Ranger 284 in a public Jira looks like now. Now it's okay, it's like, you cannot say what is it, right? But just after I sent them information, they put my exploit, my proof of concept script, on the public Jira. So they did like a full disclosure. And like I had to write them that, no, sorry, you published it. So now like everybody with an access to Ranger can hack into the other installations. And the guy responded, oh, okay, I will change it. Like, no like fear at all. Okay, let's go to the distribution specifics. So Hadoop's got many distributions. Here is a list of probably not all of them, but most of them. The two big players are Cloudera and Hortonworks, but of course there are many others. There are many others small which are cloud-based. Actually, Cloudera and Hortonworks are both. They can, you can download its software, you can download it as a virtual appliance, and you can download it as, and you can run it in their cloud. So, what's the difference between these two types of Hadoop installations? Basically, if your installation is cloud-based, you do not have any impact on the security of it. So the operator of the cloud defines security, the network level access, the network ACLs, and so on. But at least in cloud environment, they can do a quick updates of the components or of the whole distribution. And it's crucial because when you host Hadoop environment locally, you've got full control of your Hadoop installation, but you have to maintain it, so you have to update it. And it's not so easy. So the question is, how long does it take to create a new distro version? So for example, for Hortonworks and actually for Cloudera, the major number is updated every 1 year, minor every 3 months, but there are a lot of security patches, not security, but functional. Sometimes there is security patch every 1-2 months. And it's not so easy to update and Hadoop installations. The question is, if you update your Hadoop installations every year, how many components are outdated and how many vulnerabilities are in these components? And how long does it take to deploy a new distro at a company? For example, at the bank that we worked for, a deployment of the new distro takes 6 months. It doesn't matter if it's a major or minor. Major maybe even more. But so, for example, it takes 3 months or 1 year to create a new distro version, and then 6 months in a bank to deploy it and test it so that it goes to the production environment, right? So here is a list of all maybe Apache components in the Hortonworks Hadoop environment. So from this list, you can see that there are a lot of outdated components. For example, like Ranger. Is there a Ranger? Yeah. Ranger in HDP 2.2 is version 0.4. In HDP 2.1, they didn't use Ranger, they used XA Secure, which is the previous version, previous name of the Ranger, right? It's not even here. And out of locally hosted Hadoop environments, HDP 2.3 was released in July 2015, and I would say it's not a lie if more than half of Hadoop environments are still on HDP 2.2 or below. Okay, so what are the risks and vulnerabilities connected to distro specifics? Of course, old components with known issues. We've seen a lot of old OS components like Java, PHP, or whatsoever. Old OS components which are directly connected to the Apache interfaces. So for example, Uzi and HDFS used an old version of Tomcat, and it was like a different version of the OS Tomcat, right? Of course, old Hadoop components like old Hue, old Ambari, old Ranger, it happens all the time. The problem with distros are also that they are, okay, still about the old components. The question is, what is a responsible disclosure, what is a full disclosure? Because, for example, we found a vulnerability in Ambari, and if we were about to do a full disclosure, we'll do it just after finding a vulnerability in Ambari. But after we supplied information to Ambari guys, then the Hadoop patched it, then the Hortonworks take the work from the Hadoop guys and do their distro update. It is about like at least 1 month for patching Hadoop, Ambari, at least 3 months to do a distro update. If it's just a patch, that's 1 month, 2 months. And then a deployment in a bank, which takes 6 months. So a living vulnerability is actually still after 1 year after finding it and doing a full or even responsible disclosure. And that's an easy vulnerability because it was found in the Ambari and the Hadoop guys know that they should patch. What if there is a vulnerability in jQuery, then the jQuery is patched and you can do the responsible disclosure, right? But Django uses jQuery, Hue uses Django, Hortonworks HDP uses Hue, and on the end, you've got deployment in the bank. And this vulnerability can be 2 years even on the internet. Okay. Okay. What we've got more in the distros? We've got default passwords. We've seen SSH key is configured, so you don't have to use passwords, but still default passwords like MySQL password did work. So we even found a situation when a Hadoop production environment, there was no MySQL password because the server was in the DMZ. But out of other vulnerabilities, you can access the DMZ, the local network, and open MySQL database without any passwords. And actually, the default configuration when the Hadoop installation is provided as a virtual appliance is very not secure. I mean, there is completely no network level hardening, no HTTP hardening, so a lot of HTTP attacks which has small risk, but they still generate some risk, like clickjacking, session management, like error handling, debug turn on by default. These are vulnerabilities which are by default in the Hadoop installation. Actually, there is a presentation. Actually, I switched with Jeremy the session times. But Jeremy has a presentation about hacking virtual appliance, and Hadoop is in most cases provided as a virtual appliance. And all of techniques presented by Jeremy may apply to hacking Hadoop installations like Hortonworks HDP or Cloudera CDH. Okay, what we've got more, that's the default configuration. I mentioned about that earlier. How much time do I've got? Okay, so we still got external interfaces for like other clients or interconnections to the other subsystems. The whole Hadoop itself has like more than 25 Apache modules, which are written by the Apache guys, but there are a lot of vendor and distro-specific apps interfaces. Actually, all of Hadoop environments we've tested are connected to the other monitoring tools, which are not exactly Hadoop stuff. So, for example, like Ganglia or Splunk for the server monitoring. Hadoop, in every case we've seen it, is connected to some out provider, like OAuth, Kerberos, LDAP, in most cases LDAP. And of course, if you've got many apps, then you've got many targets. The funny thing about Hadoop is that most of these Apache models are open source. So everybody can find vulnerabilities or think about looking into code and looking for some vulnerabilities. And the funny thing is that if we found so trivial vulnerabilities in the open source software, then we've got a problem because nobody tested it before. And big data, as from the business perspective, has got like a lot of risk connected to the security. Okay, so as for the summary, I would like to show you like a quick checklist on how to protect your big data environment. A bigger form of the checklist will be presented like for the additional materials. You can contact me for that. It should be also published on the OWASP checklist website. Okay, so for the network access, you should keep it super tight. So the admin interfaces should be accessible only from the computers of administrators. Hue interface should be accessible only from employees' computers, not from the internet. And of course, nothing should be on the internet. If something should be accessible from the internet, then it should be through the VPN, right? Excessive user permissions. So actually, that's about mapping business roles to permissions. And I mean, not in the Ambari itself, but to really make a list of like which employee can do what in Hadoop installation. This is crucial to not just put, because I've asked my friends like who work with big data environments, and I asked them like, so what level of access do you have? Do you have access to the all data? And he said, all employees get access to all of the data. No business roles or like permissions. Okay, for the typical web vulnerabilities, well, you should pen test it. So even though you cannot update the Hadoop itself, then you should provide some like independent security countermeasures, like web application firewall or some like simple mod rewrite scripts to stop the attacks. And list of all components used by Hadoop is a must. I mean, that's not easy to do, and you may spend a lot of time doing that. So first you made the list that you've got Hadoop environment. In Hadoop environment, you've got Apache, Ambari, Hue, and so on and so on and so on. Then Apache Ambari uses, for example, Apache Hue uses Django. And that's the next software on the list. But Django uses jQuery and something, something, something. Then you can use software like, I don't know, OWASP dependency check or other software which looks for dependencies and CVEs, numbers, vulnerabilities in this software. And then you can easily say that your solution is up to date. Okay. Distros dependent vulnerabilities, you've got no control over that, but a pen test after the integration should be really made. So you have to demand security from the software suppliers, and in the in the deal of to the integrator, there should be like a note that if there are any security vulnerabilities, they should patch it in 1 week or whatsoever. Okay, and as for the external system components and connections, you should also, as for the components, make a list of all external connections. So, for example, LDAP, Kerberos, OAuth, Splunk, Ganglia, and actually a quick threat modeling on that, and to find which of these components should be tested additionally, like pen tested. That I would also advise as a must. Okay, that's all from me as for now. If you've got any questions, I'm open to that. If you want additional materials, then just contact me. Thank you. Any questions?
Yes. Thank you for your talk. I want to ask something not related. So, in your experience, when you're doing pen tests for banks, some companies, how often it results in compromise of core systems?
It depends what do you call a compromise. In case of banking stuff or Hadoop stuff, shell on the server it's not the only way of the compromise, because getting access to data, like online banking data, getting data out from the other client, like his transactions, is also a compromise for a bank. So it's complete compromise. And I would say half of the pen test finish up with critical vulnerabilities which might compromise the bank.
Thank you.
Okay, any other? Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. Based on your experience, are businesses basically ready to respond to such security risks? I mean, you provided quite trivial things that should have been thought about, well, before they started development. And given how insecure the software is, from your experience, do businesses refuse using Hadoop? Or maybe there is no point refusing because all the competitors are as bad as Hadoop is?
No. They use Hadoop because it makes money for them. And they do not, most of the companies do not care about security. Of course, they've got some risks like, oh, well, if that would compromise our company, we are dead. But most of the companies do not know how to prevent it. But I haven't heard about like refusion of integrating Hadoop because of the security risks. Actually, no. Companies do not care about security. And actually, like only from my experience, only financial industry are the big players who's got money to pen test, to do like a whole pen test of the, let's say, Hadoop installation or like online banking system. Because any other company would not pay for like 50 man days of testing Hadoop installation.
But are other big data providers as bad as Hadoop, or do you know that?
You cannot call like any other. Well, Hadoop is not the name of the particular solution, because the particular solutions are Cloudera, Hortonworks, and so on. So Hadoop is like what you call big data Hadoop. That's the way. Okay, if there are not any others, then thank you.